I never imagined the sound of my own body hitting the kitchen floor could be so loud, so sharp, so final. 1 second, I was standing at the stove trying to steady my breathing the way my doctor taught me, and the next, I was crashing backward, my spine slamming against the hard edge of the kitchen island before I slid down onto the cold tile. The impact sent a blinding burst of pain through my lower back and up my ribs. For a second, I could not breathe. I was 5 months pregnant, and my belly tightened instantly in a violent spasm that stole the air from my lungs. All I could think was protect the baby. Protect the baby. Ethan stood over me, towering, his face twisted with an anger that no longer surprised me but still managed to terrify me every time it appeared. His voice sliced through the ringing in my ears. "You ruined dinner again. You never listen." I tried to push myself sideways, curling my arms around my stomach, but my hands shook uncontrollably as another stabbing pain shot through my abdomen. Ethan grabbed my wrist and yanked me upward a few inches before shoving me back down. My shoulder hit the wooden floor with a dull crack that made me bite down on a scream. It was not the crack of a broken bone. It was something deeper, a realization, the stark certainty that something inside me that used to feel alive and hopeful had just shattered. I whispered his name, barely audible. "Ethan, please." "The baby." That only made him scoff. "You are not hurt. Stop using the baby as an excuse to manipulate me." I tried to crawl, dragging my body an inch at a time toward the back door. The tile was freezing against my palms, and each movement made my belly pull tight, as if my daughter inside me were flinching from the chaos. My breath came out in short, panicked bursts, but I forced myself forward. I knew if I stayed on that floor any longer, something worse would happen. When my fingers brushed the cold metal of the door handle, hope flickered for a second. Then, Ethan's hand fisted around my hair, jerking my head back so sharply that tears sprang to my eyes. "You are not going anywhere." His voice was low and controlled, which somehow scared me even more than when he yelled. Pain shot down my spine as he forced me upright by my hair. My vision blurred around the edges, and I could hear my heartbeat pounding inside my skull. I choked out a sob, clutching my belly with both arms. Another sharp tightening rippled through me. Something was wrong. I could feel it. I tried to say stop, but the word barely came out. I thought I might pass out. Just then, there was a dull thud on the shared wall from our neighbor's townhouse, followed by a voice. "Everything all right over there?" Ethan froze. For one suspended moment, there was silence so heavy I could feel it pressing against my chest. Then he let go of my hair, and I collapsed forward, catching myself with trembling hands. His tone shifted instantly, becoming syrupy sweet and falsely concerned. "Stay still. I am trying to help you." The way he said it made bile rise in my throat. My body screamed in pain with every breath. He crouched beside me, adjusting his expression into something almost tender. Someone might have believed him. I did once. I forced myself to look up at him, and a wave of fear went through me so deep and cold that it knocked the breath from my lungs. Something inside him had snapped long before tonight, but this was the first time he stopped pretending it had not. Minutes later, I was in the passenger seat of his car, still shaking my hands pressed against the underside of my belly as if I could hold my daughter in place. Ethan kept glancing at me with that manufactured worry, the same look he used when other people were watching. He kept rehearsing the story out loud. "You slipped. You fell. Twice. You panicked. You scared me." I said nothing. I could barely speak. The pain in my abdomen came in waves now, deep and wrong. By the time we reached the emergency room, my legs were numb and my palms were damp with sweat. The fluorescent lights felt too bright, too clean, too indifferent. A nurse approached immediately, a woman in her late 40s with steady eyes and a voice so calm it felt like a lifeline. "I am Nurse Hallie. Can you hear me?" I nodded weakly, clutching my stomach. Ethan stepped forward before I could speak, launching into his rehearsed story. "She fell in the kitchen. She is overreacting. She is pregnant and emotional." Hallie did not even look at him. She looked at me. Really looked. Then she turned to Ethan and spoke in a level tone that sliced through the air like a blade. "Sir, I need you to step out. Now." He opened his mouth to argue, but she cut him off with a single sentence that made the blood drain from his face. "We have already documented her injuries. The domestic violence protocol has been activated. The authorities are being notified automatically. Ethan froze. Completely. And in that moment, through the pain and fear, one thought crystallized in my mind, sharp and unshakable. This will be the last time he ever hurts me or my baby. I will make him pay. People used to tell me I was lucky. They would smile when they said it sometimes with a little envy tucked beneath their compliments, the way people do when they think your life is exactly what they have always wanted. 2 years ago, before everything fell apart, I believed them. I believed I had the kind of life others admired. We lived in a quiet neighborhood in Fort Collins, Colorado, in a home with a neatly trimmed lawn-wide windows that let in morning sun and a kitchen filled with the soft hum of appliances I had picked out when Ethan and I first got married. I thought I had stability. I thought I had love. Back then, I worked as a pediatric nurse, a job that felt meaningful and grounding. I loved the kids, even the ones who came in scared or cranky or hurting. I loved the way a simple smile or a gentle explanation could ease their fear. Parents often told me I had a calming presence that I made the hospital less frightening. My coworkers said I had a gift for comforting others. What none of them knew was how little comfort I had in my own home. Ethan worked as a mechanical engineer, the kind of job that made people assume he was responsible, stable, reliable. He was all of those things on paper and in public. He played the role perfectly. He opened doors for me, complimented my work, put his hand on my lower back when we entered a room like he was proud to stand beside me. At family gatherings, he would tell stories that made people laugh, and he would talk about our future with the kind of confidence that sounded like devotion. People adored him. They thought I was lucky to have him. At first, I thought so too. But the thing about control is that it rarely looks like control in the beginning. It starts small, almost invisible, like a thread you do not notice tightening until suddenly it is wrapped around you so many times there is no room to breathe. The first time Ethan asked to check my phone, he did it with a smile. He said he wanted to see the picture I took of the puppy at the park, and I handed him my phone without thinking. When he scrolled through my messages pretending to laugh at something a coworker had sent, I thought it was a quirk, nothing more. When he asked me a week later who I was texting and why I was smiling at my screen, I brushed it off as curiosity. When he told me he did not like the idea of me having late shifts because people might flirt with me, I thought it was protectiveness. That is how it begins. With misinterpretations, you choose to accept because the alternative feels too heavy. He would call me multiple times during my shift breaks, insisting it was because he missed me. He would ask for pictures to prove where I was. If I did not reply quickly enough, he would say he worried something happened. I mistook his obsession for affection. I convinced myself that being loved intensely was something every woman should want. But it was not love. It was surveillance. Over time, he began asking about my schedule with a level of detail that made me uneasy. What time exactly are you leaving? Who is working with you tonight? Who did you talk to in the hallway? Why did your voice sound tired earlier? Did something happen? When I pushed back, even gently, he would look hurt, as if I were denying him something he deserved. I did not want to be the reason he felt insecure, so I softened. I gave explanations. I apologized for making him worry. This is how control grows quietly disguised as concern. Then there was Ruth, my mother-in-law. She was a woman who carried her beliefs like concrete blocks, heavy, immovable, unchanging. From the moment she met me, I sensed her disapproval. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. She complimented my work as a nurse, but added that Ethan deserved a wife who would eventually stay home with their children. She criticized the way I organized my kitchen cabinets. She made comments about my appearance with a sweetness that barely concealed the sting. When Ethan and I announced our pregnancy, she said congratulations, but followed it with a lecture about how pregnancy was no excuse to become lazy or overly emotional. I learned quickly that Ruth believed her son could do no wrong. Any tension or conflict was my fault. If Ethan worried, I needed to reassure him. If Ethan questioned me, I needed to answer. If Ethan corrected me, I needed to accept it. According to her, he was a gift and I should behave as if I knew it. The early signs were there, but I ignored them. I worked long hours at the hospital, constantly moving, comforting, assessing, and while the work was exhausting, it reminded me who I was. A capable woman. an independent woman, a woman who mattered. But the second I stepped into our house, that certainty began to unravel. Ethan always wanted to know who I talked to, what parents said, whether the male doctors were friendly with me. If I laughed at something a coworker said, he would ask what was so funny with a tone that made my stomach tighten. If I came home tired and quiet, he interpreted it as anger toward him. If I enjoyed spending time with my coworkers after a shift, he interpreted that as me choosing others over him. And yet, whenever I expressed discomfort, he twisted it. He would say, "I just love you so much. I just want to protect our future." Women in my support group would later tell me this was classic emotional manipulation, but at the time, I did not have those words. All I had was a constant sense of trying to prevent something I could not name. When I became pregnant, everything intensified. What should have been a joyful time became a tightrope walk. Ethan commented on my changing body constantly. He would say, "You are getting bigger faster than expected. You need to slow down on the carbs." Or, "You look tired. Maybe you should try harder with your appearance." If I ordered takeout after a long shift, he would say it was unhealthy for the baby. If I complained about back pain, he would accuse me of exaggerating. It was as if my pregnancy became a performance he expected me to perfect. And if I failed, he punished me with silence, criticism, or anger. When I was 5 months pregnant, he suggested I should reduce my hours at work. When I told him it was not financially responsible, he said a good mother would prioritize her child over her job. When I reminded him I had always been financially independent, he said it bothered him that I was around other men all day. He did not frame it as insecurity. He framed it as me causing his discomfort. By then, my world had shrunk. I went from being surrounded by people who valued me to feeling alone, even when standing in my own kitchen. I no longer wore makeup because Ethan accused me of trying to impress someone. I no longer stopped for coffee after work because he wanted me home immediately. I no longer confided in friends because he questioned every text I sent. To the outside world, I was living a dream. A good job, a stable marriage, a beautiful home, a baby on the way. To me, it felt like I was slowly suffocating. And then his mother arrived for her extended visit, and everything I had tried to hold together began to crack. Pregnancy was supposed to be the moment everything softened. That is what people told me. They said husbands become gentler, more patient, more protective when they know a child is coming. I believed that myth with all my heart. I thought Ethan would finally relax, finally stop questioning every breath I took, finally see me as someone he needed to support instead of someone he needed to scrutinize. I was wrong. The very moment my pregnancy became visible, something shifted inside him. A darkness I had only glimpsed before began to rise to the surface. At first, it showed up as comments he passed off as jokes. "You are gaining weight faster than you should." I would laugh awkwardly because I thought he was teasing, but his eyes remained flat, humorless. Other times, he would touch my stomach with a strange mix of pride and disapproval, saying things like, "Do you think maybe you are eating a little too much?" Or, "I hope you do not let yourself go completely." He started paying attention to everything I ate. If I reached for a bagel, he would say, "Do you really need all those carbs?" If I felt nauseous and skipped a meal, he accused me of being irresponsible. I could not win. Every choice became evidence that I was doing something wrong. By the time I reached the 5-month mark, my body had changed enough that I moved more slowly and felt tired more easily. I remember one morning when I sat on the edge of the bed rubbing my lower back after a long shift. Ethan watched me and shook his head. "You really should try to make yourself more presentable. You are starting to look messy." I stared at him stunned. I had just worked 12 hours caring for sick children, some of them fighting for their lives, and all he saw was an inconvenience. I tried to hide how much his words hurt, but he noticed. He always noticed. Whenever I was quiet, he claimed I was being dramatic or moody. Pregnancy hormones, he would mutter, as if that explained everything he disliked. What he never acknowledged was his own anger simmering under the surface. I started receiving texts from Ruth, my mother-in-law, several times a week. She would comment on my symptoms as if I were exaggerating them. When I told her I was having trouble sleeping because my hips hurt, she said, "When I was pregnant with Ethan, I never complained." When I mentioned that I felt exhausted after double shifts, she replied, "Working mothers always use pregnancy as an excuse." According to her, nothing I felt was valid. Nothing I did was enough. She constantly reminded me how she raised Ethan alone after his father died, how strong she was, how I should be more like her. "You have one job now," she said once. "Make sure Ethan is taken care of." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that I was the one working full-time while growing a child inside me, while managing a household, while dealing with her son's unpredictable moods. But I stayed quiet. Silence felt safer. At work, my coworkers noticed changes in me. They said I seemed tired, jumpy, distracted. I brushed it off, blaming pregnancy. The truth was that Ethan's criticism echoed in my mind constantly. Every step I took felt monitored even when he was nowhere near me. When I reached the midway point of my pregnancy, my doctor advised me to reduce my hours slightly because my blood pressure was rising. When I told Ethan, he looked at me with suspicion instead of concern. "Are you sure this is not just you trying to get some time off?" I could not even respond. I just stared at him, feeling something inside me twist painfully. That night, he told me he did not like me working at the hospital. He said the environment was unsafe. He said I was putting the baby at risk. When I told him we needed the income and that I loved my job, he accused me of choosing strangers over our child. He did not ask what I wanted. He did not ask what I needed. He only demanded. He controlled. He suffocated. His possessiveness grew so slowly that I barely recognized it until I realized I no longer saw my friends. I stopped going to lunch with coworkers because Ethan always wanted updates about who was there and what we talked about. I stopped visiting my sister because Ethan said she filled my head with negativity. I stopped going on walks after work because Ethan worried someone might approach me. He said he was protecting me, but every restriction chipped away at something inside me until I felt like a shadow of myself. Then came the night everything shifted even further. I was in the nursery folding baby clothes, tiny onesies with patterns of stars and soft blankets my coworkers gifted me. Ethan walked in and frowned immediately. "Why are you doing that now?" he asked. I said I wanted to organize the dresser while I still had energy. He stared at me like I had done something wrong. "I wish you would wait for me. You always try to make decisions without me." I reminded him gently that organizing baby clothes was not a major decision. His reaction was instant. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed. "You always think you know better," he said. "Just like your job. Just like everything else." I felt small. So small. And I hated it. I hated that I had gone from being a capable nurse who could calm terrified children to a woman who apologized constantly for things that did not require apologies. I hated that I could not remember the last time Ethan looked at me with warmth instead of irritation. I hated that even though I was carrying our child, I felt more alone than I ever had in my life. The next day, something happened that stayed with me. A young mother came into the pediatric unit with her toddler who had a fever that would not break. She looked exhausted and scared the way mothers often do when something is wrong with their child. When I spoke to her in a calm voice, she began to cry. She told me her husband yelled at her earlier for waiting too long to bring their son in. She said he blamed her. She said she felt like she could not do anything right. I sat beside her and said softly, "None of this is your fault. You are doing the best you can. You are protecting your child, and that makes you a good mother." When she thanked me with tears still clinging to her eyelashes, something inside me cracked open. I could comfort strangers. I could show them compassion. I could recognize abuse in others. But I could not recognize it in myself. Or maybe I did. And maybe I was just too afraid to name it. When my pregnancy reached the point where I could feel my daughter's little flutters every day, I started talking to her quietly when Ethan was not around. I would rest my hands on my belly and whisper, "I am here. I will keep you safe." But even as I said it, I was not sure it was true. Ethan's anger was escalating. Ruth's interference was increasing. My world was shrinking. And the more I tried to keep the peace, the more the peace slipped away. The worst part was that I kept hoping things would get better. I kept hoping Ethan would see the baby's ultrasound pictures and soften. I kept hoping he would hold my belly while she kicked and remember that he loved me once. I kept hoping we would become a family the way I imagined. Instead, everything was building towards something inevitable, something dangerous, something that would break the fragile illusion I was desperately trying to hold together. Pregnancy did not change Ethan for the better. It changed him into someone I barely recognized, and I was about to learn just how dark that transformation could become. Ruth arrived on a Thursday afternoon carrying two oversized suitcases, as if she planned to move in permanently rather than stay the 10 days she promised. I watched from the front window as Ethan jumped out of the car to greet her, lifting her bags like a dutiful son. She kissed his cheek, straightened his collar, and whispered something that made him smile in that proud little boy way he saved only for her. I knew then that whatever space I still had in my own home was about to shrink even more. When they walked inside, Ruth's eyes immediately scanned the living room the way people appraise a hotel suite they are about to complain about. Without even removing her coat, she said, "The house feels a little cold, don't you think?" That was her first comment. It wouldn't be her last. I forced a smile and said I would turn the thermostat up. She stepped past me, looking around like she expected dust to leap out and attack her. Ethan trailed behind her, nodding and humming in agreement to every small criticism she made. I felt my chest tighten. I wanted her visit to go smoothly. I wanted peace. But deep down, I knew it was impossible. I had barely finished placing her luggage in the guest room before she asked to see the nursery. I hesitated, not because I didn't want her to see it, but because I knew she wouldn't approve. I had spent weeks choosing soft, warm-toned colors, pastel greens, and gentle creams that felt calming. The rocking chair was placed beside the window, the dresser was organized by size, and the crib sat against the far wall where the light was softest. To me, it felt like love. To her, it looked like a mistake waiting to be corrected. She stepped inside and exhaled sharply. "Oh, dear," she said, "this looks cluttered." It didn't. Not even a little. Everything was arranged neatly with intention. The walls were decorated with watercolor prints of animals' gifts from coworkers who were excited for the baby. The blankets were folded. The toys were still wrapped. But Ruth walked straight to the dresser and opened drawers without asking. She clicked her tongue at the way I folded the clothes. She opened the closet and frowned at the arrangement. She lifted a blanket and shook her head as if the pattern itself offended her. "Ethan," she said loudly, "why is the crib in this corner? This isn't safe at all." I felt heat flood my cheeks. I had researched everything. I had measured the distance from the heater vent, checked the sunlight at different times of day, made sure the crib was placed according to pediatric safety guidelines I already knew from years in my profession. But none of that mattered to Ruth. She decided she knew better because she had raised one child 30 years ago. Ethan stood beside her nodding. "Yeah, it does seem a little cramped." I blinked at him. I wanted to say, "You've never mentioned this before." "You said it looked perfect," but I swallowed the words. I had learned to hold my tongue. That evening I cooked dinner despite the ache in my back and the swelling in my ankles. I made roasted chicken with herb-steamed vegetables and mashed potatoes because Ruth liked traditional meals. The moment I set the plate in front of her, she said, "You used too much butter. Pregnant women should watch their cholesterol." Ethan didn't defend me. He never did. Instead, he added, "Maybe next time use olive oil instead." I lowered my gaze and continued eating. That week became a slow suffocation. Every day, Ruth found something new to criticize. The laundry detergent I used was too harsh. The crib mobile was overstimulating. My maternity clothes were unflattering. My hair was too messy. I should wear more makeup because Ethan deserved a wife who didn't let herself go. She said these things casually, like she was discussing the weather. Ethan backed her up every time. When I quietly reminded him that my doctor recommended rest, he said, "My mom handled things just fine when she was pregnant. You should listen to her experience." I started disappearing into the nursery just to breathe. I would sit in the rocking chair and place my hands on my stomach, waiting for the small flutter of my daughter's kicks. Each movement grounded me, reminding me I was not alone. But even that small sanctuary didn't last. On the third day of Ruth's visit, I came home from work early after feeling dizzy during a shift. When I walked into the house, the silence felt wrong. Too still. Too staged. I followed the faint sound of humming and stepped into the nursery. My heart sank. Everything was different. The crib had been moved to the opposite wall. The dresser was pushed near the door. The blanket basket was gone. and the decorations I spent months choosing were missing, replaced with faded, yellowing items from Ethan's childhood. I touched the crib gently, letting my fingers run along the railing I had assembled by hand. It felt foreign now, like a room that had been taken from me, like a violation. Ruth didn't look up when I entered. She stood on a step stool, adjusting curtains she brought from her own house. Curtains that clashed with everything. Curtains I didn't want. Without turning, she said, "The way you had this set up was completely impractical." I froze, too stunned to speak. She descended from the stool and finally faced me. A wave of anger rolled through me so suddenly that I felt lightheaded. I had spent months preparing this room, imagining the moment I would bring my daughter home, imagining rocking her to sleep, imagining soft lullabies filling the air, and now it felt like the room belonged to someone else. I took a long breath. My hands trembled as I said with all the politeness I could muster, "Ruth, I appreciate your help, but I wanted the nursery arranged the way it was. Could we put it back, please?" She stared at me like I had slapped her. Her expression hardened into something sharp and unforgiving. "Excuse me," she said. "I have raised a child. You clearly do not know what you are doing." I blinked, stunned by the venom in her tone. I took another breath. "I want it the way I had it. This is my baby's room." My voice cracked on the word my, but I held my ground. Ruth's face reddened. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "You disrespectful girl. I am here trying to help you, and this is how you treat me." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I said nothing. I should have walked away. I should have kept quiet. But something inside me broke open, something held down for too long. I said softly, "Please, stop touching my things without asking." That was it. That tiny sentence, and it was enough to ignite an explosion. Ruth lunged verbally with a fury I had never seen before. She accused me of being ungrateful, selfish, lazy, an embarrassment to her son, a hormonal mess who should feel lucky Ethan bothered to stay with me at all. Her voice rose until it echoed through the entire house. I stood there frozen, hand on my belly, absorbing every word like a physical blow. And just when I thought it could not get worse, I heard the front door open. Ethan's footsteps approached. His mother spun around and began her performance. She told him I had yelled at her. She told him I had refused her help. She told him I had been rude since the moment she arrived. She twisted every detail into a narrative where she was the victim and I was the villain. Ethan looked at me with a fury that made my knees weaken. He did not ask for my side. He did not pause. He believed her instantly. His voice dropped into that cold, dangerous tone that meant trouble. That was the moment I understood something with chilling clarity. Ruth was not just a mother who defended her son. She was the architect of the man he had become, and the peace I had tried so desperately to protect was gone, completely gone. I will never forget the moment I saw it. The nursery was quiet, the late afternoon sunlight spilling across the carpet in soft golden streaks. I had walked in to put away a tiny pair of socks I bought on my lunch break, a pair with little embroidered moons that made me tear up in the baby aisle. I just wanted one peaceful second to imagine holding my daughter someday, to imagine rocking her in the chair by the window. But instead, as soon as I stepped in, I noticed the trash bin. Something white was sticking out from the top. Something familiar. My pulse kicked up. With trembling fingers, I reached inside and pulled it out. It was the ultrasound photo from my 20-week appointment, the one that showed her little hand curled into a perfect tiny fist, the one where the doctor said she looked strong, the one I had taped above the dresser because it made me smile every morning. And now it was crumpled, bent, tossed aside like garbage. My throat closed. For a moment, I could not breathe. I smoothed the paper gently, trying to flatten the creases, my fingertips brushing the distorted outline of her body. My baby. My little girl. Ruth had thrown away her picture. Not misplaced it. Not moved it. Thrown it away. Something deep inside me, something buried under months of fear and silence, snapped. When Ruth walked into the room, holding a stack of old baby blankets she brought from her attic, I held up the photo with shaking hands. "Why was this in the trash?" I asked quietly. My voice sounded foreign, distant. Ruth barely glanced at it. That blurry picture. Oh, please, you act like it is some priceless artwork. It was messy and taped in the wrong place. I threw it out because the room needed order. My jaw dropped. I stared at her, stunned. I felt heat rush through my body, a burning mix of anger and disbelief. This was not just about a photo. This was about everything she had taken over, everything she had erased, everything she had done to crush my sense of belonging in my own home. I swallowed hard. You had no right to do that. Ruth pivoted sharply, narrowing her eyes at me. Excuse me, you heard me? I said, voice trembling but firm. That picture means something to me. To us. You cannot just throw away my daughter's ultrasound. For the first time since she arrived, Ruth seemed genuinely taken aback. Not intimidated, not apologetic, just surprised that I had dared to speak. Oh, she said slowly, so that is what this is. The hormones finally got to you. I shook my head. This is not hormones. This is disrespect. That was the first moment I had truly stood up to her, the first time I refused to shrink. And she hated it, her face twisted, turning red like she was swallowing fire. Disrespect, she repeated. You have some nerve. You should be thanking me for fixing all the mistakes in this room. I do not need your help, I said, my voice stronger now. I never asked for your help. I want the nursery the way I had it. Everything froze. The air shifted. Even the sunlight seemed to dim. Ruth stepped toward me until she was inches from my face. She smelled like strong perfume and anger. Listen to me very carefully, she whispered. I raised a good man, a better man than you deserve. And if he knew the way you spoke to me right now, he would be ashamed of you. The words struck hard, not because they were true, but because I knew she would tell him exactly that. And she did. Ethan came home less than an hour later. I heard the front door slam. Heavy footsteps. The sharp sound of his keys dropping into the bowl by the console table. Then his voice calling his mother's name. When he entered the nursery and saw her sitting on the rocking chair with one hand pressed dramatically to her chest, I felt dread coil inside me like a tightening rope. What happened? He demanded. Ruth pointed at me with a trembling finger as if accusing me of a crime. She yelled at me, Ethan. She told me to get out of the nursery. She said I did not know what I was doing. She was so disrespectful. Ethan turned to me with a look that drained the blood from my body. Did you yell at my mother? I shook my head immediately. Ethan, I did not yell. I just told her she could not throw away the baby's things. His eyes darkened. You embarrassed her. You made her cry. I glanced at Ruth. No tears, not even close. She stared at me with a small, victorious smirk hidden behind her fake shock. Ethan, please let me explain. I tried. His voice cut through mine. No. You listen. My mother came here to help you because you are overwhelmed, and you repay her by attacking her. I felt something crumble inside me. I knew he would take her side. He always did. But hearing him twist the truth so confidently, so easily, made the room spin. She threw away the ultrasound photo, Ethan. I held it up as if proof would matter. This! She threw this away. He snatched it from my hand and stared at it for barely a second before tossing it onto the dresser with a dismissive flick. It is just a picture. You have others. Just a picture. Just a picture. As if my daughter's first image meant nothing. As if my feelings meant nothing. As if I meant nothing. Ethan stepped closer, towering over me. You owe my mother an apology. My stomach dropped. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear him. I am not apologizing for asking her not to throw away my things, I whispered. He stiffened. His jaw tightened. Then he said something that chilled me to my core. Ever since you got pregnant, you have become impossible, emotional, irrational, difficult. You need to get it together. I took a step back, shaking my head. His eyes followed me with cold precision. I said, apologize. I looked at Ruth. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded, waiting, relishing every second. And for the first time, I did not give in. I straightened my shoulders and said firmly, "No." The silence that followed was not silence at all. It was a warning. Ethan's expression shifted in a way that made every instinct scream danger. A flicker of rage crossed his eyes, quick and violent like a match striking in the dark. He leaned forward, voice low and dangerous. "You are going to regret this." My breath caught. I placed a protective hand on my belly, backing up instinctively. Ruth watched with satisfaction that made bile rise in my throat. She had wanted this. She had been waiting for the moment Ethan snapped, and I had just given him the excuse he needed. Ethan turned abruptly and walked out of the nursery, his footsteps pounding down the hallway. A moment later, I heard the sound of something slamming in the kitchen. A cabinet, a drawer, a warning. I stayed in the nursery for several minutes, staring at the ultrasound photo lying crumpled on the dresser. My daughter's tiny silhouette looked fragile, precious, and for the first time in my entire marriage, I felt something stronger than fear. I felt anger, not wild anger, not reckless anger, but a low, steady burn, a heat in my chest that told me I could not keep living like this, that something had to change, that I had to protect myself, protect my baby. But I had no idea how fast things were about to escalate, and how quickly that anger would be drowned out by something much darker. The breaking point did not arrive with a scream. It arrived with a quiet so sharp it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. After Ethan stormed out of the nursery, the silence that followed was heavy and unnatural, the kind of silence that makes your skin prickle, because you know something is coming. I stayed there for several minutes, one hand on my belly, the other clutching the edge of the dresser to steady myself. My daughter fluttered faintly inside me as if sensing the tension vibrating through my body. Finally, I gathered enough strength to leave the nursery. The hallway felt longer than usual, shadows stretching under the dim evening light. As I neared the kitchen, I heard the rhythmic slam of a cabinet door, then another, then the unmistakable thud of a fist hitting the countertop. I paused at the doorway, heart pounding. Ethan was standing with his back to me, shoulders rigid, his hands flat against the counter like he was trying to hold himself steady, or restrain something darker brewing inside him. I took a slow breath and said his name gently. Ethan. He turned around slowly, too slowly. His face was blank in a way that terrified me more than if he had been openly furious. Blankness meant he was past reasoning, past listening, past caring. I stepped into the kitchen, cautiously keeping my voice soft. I do not want to fight. I just want us to talk. He stared at me like he did not recognize me. Or maybe like he recognized too much. "Talk," he said, his tone quiet but razor sharp. "You humiliated my mother. You spoke to her like she is nothing." My throat tightened. "That is not what happened." She threw away the ultrasound picture. She moved everything without asking. I was overwhelmed and I asked her to stop. His jaw flexed. "You made her cry." I forced myself to keep breathing. Ruth had not cried, not even close, but the truth did not matter anymore. Ethan had already chosen his narrative. He stepped forward and I felt the coldness of the floor through my socks as I instinctively stepped back. "Don't walk away from me," he said. I stopped. My pulse hammered against my ribs so hard it hurt. "I am not walking away. I just need space." He laughed then, a short, bitter sound that made the hair on my arms rise. "You always need space. You always act like I am the problem. You treat me like the enemy." I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. "I am pregnant. I am tired. I am doing the best I can." His eyes flicked to my stomach, then back to my face. Something twisted in his expression. Not concern, not compassion. Resentment. Then he said the sentence that told me something inside him had unraveled completely. "You think growing that baby makes you special?" My mouth fell open. "Ethan, stop." He moved suddenly, grabbing my wrist so tightly that pain shot up my arm. I gasped. He leaned down, his voice inches from my face. I am done with your attitude. I am done with your disrespect. You will apologize to my mother. Now. I shook my head, tears burning behind my eyes. I am not apologizing for asking her not to throw away our daughter's things. He exhaled sharply through his nose, and I knew what was coming, even before it happened. His grip tightened. He yanked my arm downward, pulling me off balance. My foot slipped on the tile, and I stumbled sideways, trying to catch myself. Ethan did not let go. Instead, he shoved hard. The world tilted. My back hit the edge of the kitchen island with a force so violent that a sharp, white-hot pain exploded through my spine. I screamed the sound torn from my throat before I could stop it. My knees buckled. I crumpled onto the floor, clutching my stomach as another painful tightening seized me. Not a normal pregnancy cramp, something sharper. Worse. Ethan hovered over me, breathing hard. "I told you not to disrespect my mother," he said. His voice trembled with rage, and that terrified me more than the pain. I curled on my side, trying to protect my belly. My breath came in short, panicked gasps. Ethan paced in front of me, running his hands through his hair. "You do this on purpose. This dramatic collapsing, this manipulation." Tears spilled down my cheeks. "Ethan, please." My stomach hurts. Something is wrong. He didn't listen. Not even a little. He crouched down suddenly and grabbed my upper arm, hauling me halfway up. Pain shot from my ribs to my spine. I cried out, "Let go, please, let go." Instead, he pushed me again. This time, the floor rushed up faster than I could brace for it. My shoulder hit first, then my hip. A shock of pain rippled through my belly so sharply I thought I would pass out. My breath came out in broken sobs as the floor chilled my skin through my clothes. Ethan loomed over me again, his face contorted with fury. "You always make things harder. You act like everything is abuse. Just stop being dramatic." I tried to scoot backward, but my legs trembled and my arm shook violently from the impact. I grabbed the leg of the table and pulled myself away, inch by inch, my vision blurring with tears. I whispered, "Ethan, stop. Please, stop." He moved forward. I screamed, loud, louder than I ever had in my life. My voice cracked raw and desperate. "Help! Someone help!" Ethan froze, not because of my pain, but because of the pounding on the shared wall. Our neighbor's voice cut through the chaos. "Is everything okay in there?" Ethan swore under his breath, looking toward the noise. Then he looked back at me, and for the first time that night, I saw fear in his eyes. Not concern, not guilt. Fear of being seen for what he was. He stepped back. Just a little. Just enough for the room to shift. I dragged myself toward the back door, using the counter for support. My whole body burned. My belly throbbed in frightening pulses. I reached the door handle, gripping it with shaking fingers. But just as I tried to push myself up, Ethan lunged and grabbed a fistful of my hair. I screamed, the pain shooting down my spine. He yanked my head back so hard I felt a snapping sensation along my neck. "You are not leaving." His voice was a low growl. "You are not going to make me look like the bad guy." I couldn't stop crying. My daughter fluttered inside me again, weak and frantic. Something was very wrong. "Ethan, please," I begged through sobs. "The baby. Something is wrong." For 1 second, one fraction of a second, he hesitated. His grip loosened just enough for me to jerk away from him. I fell forward, hitting the floor with a dull thud, but I didn't care. I crawled, my fingers clawed at the tile. My knees scraped painfully. Every movement felt like fire tearing through my abdomen. Then finally, I reached the sliding door. I pushed it open with the last bit of strength I had left and fell halfway onto the cold wooden deck outside. The night air slapped my face. Everything spun. Behind me, Ethan stood frozen in the doorway, breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling in sharp bursts. He looked torn between grabbing me again and backing away. Then the neighbor's voice came again, louder this time. "I am calling the police!" Ethan's eyes widened. His jaw clenched. He stepped back into the kitchen, running both hands through his hair. He paced. He swore. And for the first time since the night began, he stopped touching me. I lay there on the deck, shaking uncontrollably, clutching my belly as the pain pulsed like a warning siren inside me. I forced myself to inhale, then exhale, whispering to my daughter, "Hold on, baby. Hold on." I had no idea how much danger we were both in. I only knew one thing. This night had shattered whatever was left of my marriage, completely, irreversibly, forever. The emergency room lights were blinding stark, almost cruel in how clearly they illuminated everything I wanted to hide. By the time Ethan pulled the car into the drop-off lane, my entire body was trembling violently. My hands were clasped around my belly so tightly that my knuckles had turned white. Each breath felt shallow. Wrong. Too quick or too slow, I could not tell. All I knew was that something deep inside me pulsed with a frightening rhythm that made my heart sprint. Ethan rushed around to the passenger side and opened the door with exaggerated urgency. His voice pitched higher than usual, the tone he used when he wanted strangers to think he was a good man. "Come on, honey, come on, let me help you." I recoiled when he touched my arm. Not because I wanted to, but because my body reacted on its own, flinching as if bracing for another hit. His jaw tightened for a millisecond before he masked it behind concern. He lowered his voice. "Do not do that. People are watching." He guided me out of the car, one hand on my elbow, the other hovering protectively as if he had not been the one who put me in this condition. As we stepped through the sliding glass doors, the cool hospital air hit my face. The scent of disinfectant was strangely comforting familiar from my years as a pediatric nurse. Normally, hospitals reminded me of healing, of hope. Tonight, they reminded me of survival. A woman at the triage desk saw me clutching my belly and immediately stood. "Pregnant trauma." Her voice was calm, steady. "Come with me." Ethan jumped in before I could speak. She fell. Twice. She slipped in the kitchen. "She has been emotional. She is pregnant." The nurse's eyes flicked from him to me. She saw the trembling in my hands, the redness around my wrist, the way my shoulder dipped as if strained. Her gaze sharpened. "Are you in pain?" she asked me. "Not him." "Yes," I whispered. "Something feels wrong. My abdomen." She nodded once, signaled another nurse, and in seconds they had a wheelchair under me. As they pushed me toward a room, Ethan walked beside us, narrating the story louder than necessary. She panicked. She got really dramatic. "She does that sometimes." I wanted to scream. I wanted to say the truth. But fear pressed against my throat, keeping the words trapped. The nurse leading us opened the curtain to a trauma bay and motioned for Ethan to stay outside. He immediately stepped forward. "I need to be with my wife. I am her husband. I should be here." The nurse lifted a single hand and stopped him with a firmness that made him blink. "Sir, I need privacy with my patient." He straightened, puffing his chest slightly in a way that reminded me of a teenager challenging authority. "She is pregnant with my child. I have a right to be here." The nurse didn't blink. "This is medical protocol. You will wait outside." Her voice was calm, authoritative, not angry. It was the voice of someone who had done this many times before. Ethan hesitated, but before he could argue again, another nurse stepped behind him, blocking his path. I watched all of this through a haze of pain, but also something else. Something like the first breath after nearly drowning. Once he disappeared behind the curtain, the room felt safer by several degrees. The lead nurse, a woman with warm-skinned, kind eyes and hair pulled into a practiced bun, knelt beside the bed. "My name is Hallie. I am going to take care of you, sweetheart." Her tone was so soft I nearly cried. I tried to inhale, but the movement made the cramp seize me again. My breath hitched sharply. She nodded. "Let's get an abdominal check and fetal monitoring. Hang in there." As she palpated my abdomen with careful hands, her eyes lingered on the bruises blooming across my arm, the faint discoloration near my ribs, and the red swelling along my wrist. None of these were from a fall, and Hallie knew it. She took a slow breath. "Did someone cause these injuries?" My mouth opened. Nothing came out. I shook my head because shaking my head felt safer, less dangerous, less likely to provoke the kind of rage I had just escaped. But the truth must have shown on my face anyway. Hallie didn't push. She simply said, "You are safe right now. You can tell me if anyone hurt you." Tears blurred my vision. My voice was barely a whisper. I fell. She kept her eyes on mine. "Did you?" My breath trembled. "Did you fall?" I swallowed hard. My eyes dropped to my stomach where my daughter was still moving faintly. I shook my head again, this time slower. Hallie nodded as if she expected that answer. She squeezed my hand, gently grounding me. "Thank you for trusting me." She motioned for a fetal Doppler. As another nurse placed warm gel on my belly, I stared at the ceiling, silently begging for the whooshing heartbeat that meant my daughter was still okay. The nurse pressed the wand to my skin. Seconds passed, long seconds. Then finally, the rapid, steady heartbeat filled the room like a miracle. I burst into tears. Hallie rested a hand on my shoulder. She is strong. She is holding on. Relief washed over me so hard I nearly fainted. Then the curtain jerked open. Ethan tried to step inside his face, tight with irritation disguised as concern. "Is she okay? I want to see her." Hallie stood immediately, positioning herself between him and the bed like a shield. "Sir, you need to step back." Ethan frowned, confused for half a second. "Why, I am her husband. I need to know what is happening." Hallie looked him straight in the eye. Her tone didn't rise. It didn't shake. But it cut through the room like a blade. "Because we have already documented her injuries, and the domestic violence protocol is now active. The authorities have been notified automatically." Ethan froze. The transformation on his face was instantaneous and chilling. Confusion, then shock, then fear, then anger quickly smothered under a mask of outrage. "What are you talking about?" He hissed the words. "She fell." "I told you." "She fell twice." Hallie didn't flinch. "That is not consistent with her injuries. You need to wait outside. Police are on their way." He stared at her like he expected her to back down. She didn't. She simply held his gaze with the unshakable steadiness of a woman who had seen this pattern hundreds of times, who recognized the signs, who knew exactly what she was dealing with. Slowly, Ethan stepped back. His jaw clenched so tight the muscle twitched. His eyes flicked to me, burning with silent fury, but he said nothing as the curtain closed again. As soon as he disappeared, my breath collapsed out of me. The room seemed to expand with oxygen I hadn't realized I was missing. Hallie turned back to me. "You did the right thing by coming here." I shook my head, blinking tears away. "I didn't come." He drove me. She gave me a long, quiet look. "But you called for help." My breath stilled. The memory of my scream. The neighbor pounding on the wall. I hadn't done it consciously. I had screamed from pure terror, instinct, desperation. But it had saved me. Maybe saved my daughter, too. Hallie placed her hand over mine. "You are safe now. No one will let him near you without law enforcement present." My lips trembled. My voice cracked. "He is going to be so angry." Hallie nodded, her expression softening. "I know. But he cannot touch you here, and you do not have to go home with him. We will walk you through every step. You are not alone anymore." The words hit me like a tidal wave. For months, I had been drowning silently in fear, and now suddenly someone was standing on the shore calling my name. Hallie adjusted the fetal monitor as my daughter's heartbeat continued its steady rhythm. Strong, alive, fighting. I closed my eyes as a fresh wave of tears slipped down my cheeks. That night in the ER was the first time the truth was spoken out loud. The first time someone looked at me and saw not a dramatic pregnant woman, not a wife, overreacting, not a burden, but a victim, and a mother worth protecting. And for the first time, I thought, maybe there is a way out. Maybe this night is the beginning of something different, something safer, something true. The curtain had barely settled back into place when the weight of reality hit me like a second impact. The pain in my abdomen throbbed with each breath. but now another sensation rose beneath it, something colder, sharper pressing into my chest with every passing second. Fear. Not the frantic, disoriented kind I felt on the kitchen floor. This fear was lucid, clear, heavy. The kind that comes when you finally understand that what you suspected is no longer suspicion. It is truth. And truth has consequences. Hallie checked my vitals again, adjusting the cuff around my arm with the soothing efficiency of someone who had done it 1,000 times. She kept her tone gentle, but her eyes moved like a detective scanning every bruise, every flinch, every shallow inhale. When she asked, "Does it hurt here, sweetheart?" her fingers barely grazed my rib cage, but I still recoiled. She didn't react with surprise. She reacted with certainty. She had seen this before. Too many times. I felt exposed under her gaze. In a strange way, protected too. She took notes silently, her pen moving with quiet purpose. I watched her hands steady and practiced and wondered how many women she had cared for, who told the same story with their injuries even when their mouths said nothing. A soft knock came from outside the curtain. Ethan's voice pierced through too loud, too forced. "I need to speak to my wife. Let me in." My entire body seized. My fingers curled into the sheet automatically, my breath caught halfway in my throat. Hallie didn't turn toward the sound. She didn't answer. She simply stepped 1 foot closer to my bed, positioning herself like a shield. "You do not have to see him," she said quietly. "Not unless you want to." I shook my head immediately. The motion was small, but the message was clear. Hallie nodded slowly. "I will make sure he stays out." The words felt like a lifeline tossed into dark water. She stepped out of the room for a moment, and I heard muffled voices. Ethan's was sharp, irritated, dripping with indignation. Hers was firm, steady, unyielding. When she came back, she didn't give me details. She didn't need to. Her expression told me everything. "He is waiting in the outer area. Security is nearby. He cannot enter." I exhaled shakily, releasing tension I hadn't realized had locked every muscle in my body. My hands were still shaking, my pulse still erratic. Fear had become my default state for so long that safety felt foreign, almost unbelievable. Hallie pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat. Her voice softened to a careful, measured tone. "I need you to tell me what happened." I swallowed hard, staring at the wall behind her instead of her face. My throat felt raw from screaming earlier. I shifted slightly, wincing at the pull in my abdomen. For a moment, I considered lying again, saying I slipped, saying I fell, saying I didn't want trouble, saying something to keep Ethan from exploding later. But there was something about the way Hallie waited. Patient, calm, no pressure, just presence. Something inside me cracked. He pushed me. The words came out in a whisper. I stared at my hands as they trembled in my lap. He pushed me twice. I heard the quiet inhale she took the kind people take when they're trying not to react too strongly. She didn't want to frighten me. She wanted me to keep talking. I lowered my gaze to my belly. A fresh swell of panic rose. I felt pain after I hit the island. Sharp pain. I thought I lost her. My voice broke. Hallie placed her hand over mine. That must have been terrifying. My tears fell silently. I didn't wipe them. I didn't apologize. For once, I let myself cry. She prompted gently, "Is this the first time he has been physically aggressive?" My breath stuttered. My chest tightened. "No," I said, barely audible. "He has grabbed me, pulled me, cornered me, yelled a lot, checked my phone, made me stop seeing friends. He says it is because he cares." Hallie nodded slowly, absorbing each word. "Emotional abuse is still abuse. Control is abuse. Pregnancy does not erase that." I closed my eyes. I had repeated Ethan's excuses for so long that hearing someone speak the truth aloud made my entire body sag with a strange, painful relief. Another voice came from outside the curtain. A calm, deep voice. "Hospital security. Is everything all right in here?" Hallie stood and opened the curtain slightly. "Everything is fine, but he stays where he is." "Understood." The curtain closed again. Hallie resumed her place beside me. Law enforcement will arrive shortly, she said. They will want your statement, but you do not have to speak if you do not feel ready. You are in control right now. Control. The word felt foreign on my tongue. Ethan had controlled everything for so long that I couldn't imagine what it meant to have choices. I stared at the IV line on my arm, the clear liquid dripping slowly into my veins. My daughter's heartbeat thumped from the monitor in steady rhythm. For the first time in months, I felt something other than fear. A flicker of steadiness. A spark. I lifted my head. What if he gets upset? Hallie didn't sugarcoat it. He will, but that is not your responsibility. He cannot hurt you here. He cannot approach you. He cannot take you home. My breath shook on the way out. Are you sure? Very sure. She placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. I have been doing this for 20 years. We take domestic violence extremely seriously. You and your baby are safe. My eyes flooded again. It is strange how safety can hurt, how it can unravel you more than danger because you finally realize how long you have been tense-clenched, braced for impact. Minutes later, the curtain rustled again. This time, it was a doctor, a man in his early 50s with tired eyes and a steady manner. He examined me thoroughly, ordered an ultrasound, and checked the fetal movements. The baby looks stable, he said after reviewing the scans. You need monitoring for at least 24 hours. Abdominal trauma can cause delayed complications, but your daughter is strong. The relief that swept through me felt like a wave. I pressed my hand to my stomach, whispering a thank you under my breath. Then the doctor looked at me with concern. We will need to notify law enforcement. It is mandatory with suspected assault during pregnancy. I nodded. For once, I did not hesitate. The idea of police terrified me, but the idea of going home terrified me more. When the doctor left, Hallie stayed. Her presence alone grounded me. Another contraction-like tightening rippled across my abdomen. Not labor, just stress. Too much fear, too much adrenaline. Hallie noticed immediately and helped me adjust in bed. Breathe slowly. In, out. You are okay. You are safe. The more she repeated those words, the more I felt a truth creeping in, a truth I had refused to accept for too long. I had been living in danger. Real danger. Not imagined, not exaggerated, not hormonal. Real. And tonight, for the first time, someone saw it. Someone believed it. Someone protected me. Footsteps approached again, this time heavier, more authoritative. A soft knock came on the metal frame. Denver Police Department. Hallie's eyes met mine. Do you want them to come in? I inhaled shakily. My heart thudded. My stomach tightened around my daughter. And then unexpectedly, clarity washed over me. Yes, I said. Let them in. Hallie pulled back the curtain and 2 officers stepped inside. 1 male, 1 female, both with professional calmness etched into their expressions. The female officer spoke first. Mrs. Carson, we understand you were brought in with injuries that appear inconsistent with the explanation given. We want to hear from you directly. My hands trembled. My throat felt tight. I looked down at my belly where my daughter shifted gently beneath my skin. And suddenly, the truth rose up in my chest like a tide I could no longer push down. He hurt me, I said. The words were quiet, but they were honest. He pushed me twice. He grabbed me. He pulled my hair. I was scared. I thought I would lose the baby. The officer nodded, taking notes with respectful silence. Thank you for telling us. We will protect you. As she spoke, something inside me clicked. A shift, a turning point. Fear did not vanish, but truth had finally taken its place beside it. And truth, unlike fear, builds foundations. That night in the ER, fear transformed into truth, and truth became the beginning of justice. The officers stayed calm as I spoke, allowing me to pause whenever my breath stuttered or a contraction-like pang made my voice falter. They never pushed, never rushed, never doubted. Every nod, every quiet. Take your time chipped away at the shame I had carried like a second skin. When I finished recounting what happened, the female officer asked gently, "Has he ever hurt you before tonight?" The question hung in the air. A simple question, a heavy truth. I hesitated only a moment before answering. Yes. Not like this. But yes. She scribbled something down. "That matters," she said quietly. "Patterns matter." My throat tightened. I had spent months convincing myself the patterns were not real, that if I behaved perfectly, he would calm down, that if I kept the peace long enough, motherhood would soften him. None of those hopes had survived tonight. The male officer spoke next. "We are going to take your statement formally. It can be short or detailed. Whatever you can give right now, we can come back later if you need time." I took a breath. I looked at the fetal monitor. My daughter's heartbeat thumped steadily like encouragement. Steady, strong, alive. I nodded. "I can do it." They recorded every detail. Ethan's words, his hands, the fall, the second push, the neighbor knocking, the terror I felt as I crawled to the door. Every time my voice shook, the female officer paused the recorder. "We wait until you are ready." After what felt like both an eternity and a moment, the recording ended. She clicked her pen closed and gave me the kind of look that didn't pity me, but acknowledged the strength it took to sit upright and speak while still trembling from trauma. "Thank you. We know how hard that is." Hallie stepped forward after the officers finished. She helped adjust my pillows, lifted the blanket over my legs, then pressed a cup of ice chips into my hand. Her presence was the closest thing to a safe harbor I had felt in years. I wanted to tell her thank you, but the words felt too small for what she had done, for how she had stood between me and Ethan like a wall made of steel and compassion. The next 30 minutes passed in a strange blur. Nurses moved around me with gentle urgency. Vitals checked, IV bags replaced, monitoring equipment adjusted. Each beep and click of the machines grounded me a little more. Then the officer stepped outside for a moment, and I could hear voices rising faintly from the waiting area. Ethan's voice, sharp, angry, accusing. "I told you she fell. I told you she is emotional. Why are you wasting your time? She is pregnant. Pregnant women overreact." I gripped the blanket, a shiver running through me. Hallie glanced toward the door, jaw tightening. She murmured something into the radio clipped to her scrubs. A moment later, hospital security returned and took position near the curtain. An officer peeked inside the room. "Mrs. Carson, we want to inform you that your husband is being questioned in the waiting area. His story is inconsistent with your injuries. We are detaining him until further decisions are made." My breath hitched. Detaining. The word was both comforting and terrifying. What if he blames me? That was my first instinctive thought. But then a stronger, quieter voice spoke inside me. "What he feels is no longer your responsibility." While I tried to absorb that truth, another familiar voice drifted into the hallway. A woman's voice. Older. Sharper. Ruth. She arrived like a storm, her heels clicking against the hospital floor with self-righteous rhythm. I heard her before seeing her. "This is ridiculous. My son is a good man. His wife has been unstable for months. She is hormonal. She is dramatic. She is lucky Ethan puts up with her at all." The female officer stepped into the hallway but didn't let Ruth near my room. "Ma'am, you need to stay back." Ruth scoffed loudly. "Stay back. My son is being harassed and you are telling me to stay back. He told me she slipped. She is clumsy. This is all an exaggeration." Then came the sentence that sealed her fate without her realizing it. "Honestly, some pregnant women deserve a wake-up call." That snapped something. Not in me. In the officers. Because that sentence said in public, said with no shame, said while she tried to defend her violent son, became evidence. The female officer's voice turned cold. "Thank you, ma'am. Everything you just said will be noted." Ruth blinked. "What?" "Why would you note that?" But the officer didn't answer. She walked back toward me. She pulled the curtain aside, her voice soft again. "You will want to know this." Her tone was gentle, but edged with something like grim satisfaction. "Your mother-in-law made an incriminating statement in front of multiple witnesses. It supports your account. She said you deserved it." Even though I had braced myself for anything hearing that still felt like a slap, but not a surprising one. just one that confirmed the truth I had been afraid to name. Ethan was not the only danger in my life. Ruth had molded him, excused him, fed the fire inside him until it burned me. The male officer returned with a clipboard. "Mrs. Carson, your husband is being placed under arrest for felony domestic violence against a pregnant woman." The words echoed in the room. Felony, arrest, pregnant woman. My heart pounded, my breath trembled. For a moment I felt like my body was floating above the bed. "Is he still here?" I asked. The officer nodded. "For now. He will be transported shortly. He cannot come near you. You are protected under emergency orders." He glanced at my monitors again. "You need rest, but please know that tonight justice is already in motion." I leaned back against the pillow, tears pooling in my eyes. Not the panicked ones from earlier. These were different. These were relief tears. Release tears. Truth tears. The doctor returned to confirm that my baby's heartbeat remained steady. "We are keeping you for 48 hours of observation," he said. "Abdominal trauma can have delayed complications, but for now your daughter is doing very well." Those words sank into me like sunlight warming frozen ground. My daughter is doing well. She's strong. She's holding on. I placed my hand over my belly and whispered, "We made it. We made it this far." For the next hour, the chaos outside continued. More officers arrived. Papers were signed. Questions exchanged. Voices echoed and faded. Through it all, Hallie remained a steady presence. She brought warm blankets, adjusted my pillows, checked on the fetal monitor. At one point, she sat beside me, her voice low. "I need you to hear something important. You are not crazy. You are not dramatic. You are not at fault. What he did to you is a crime. What she said about you is cruel, and you deserve safety. You deserve peace." My eyes blurred instantly. No one had spoken to me like that in years, maybe ever. When everything finally quieted down, the room felt oddly still. The officers left after assuring me they would file everything immediately. Security remained posted nearby. Ethan was taken through a side exit, handcuffed, escorted by 2 officers. Ruth followed, yelling at them, yelling at him, yelling at the world, but no one listened to her. No one indulged her. No one believed her. For the first time, her voice carried no power, and that, too, was justice in motion. As the night deepened, machines beeped softly beside me. My daughter kicked faintly under my palm. A small, brave movement. I closed my eyes and let one long, slow breath fill my lungs. Ethan could no longer reach me. Ruth could no longer control the narrative. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something that felt almost like freedom. Justice was not finished, but it had begun. The hours after Ethan's arrest passed in a haze of fluorescent lights, steady beeping monitors, and the soft hum of hospital air vents. I drifted in and out of sleep, waking each time with the same instinctive fear that he might be standing over me. But every time my eyes opened, all I saw were the blue curtains, the IV pole, and the fetal monitor that kept thumping out my daughter's determined heartbeat. I stayed in the hospital for 2 nights. 48 hours of checks, ultrasounds, and blood pressure monitoring. 48 hours of nurses patting my arm gently when fear flickered across my face. 48 hours of not hearing Ethan's voice, not feeling his presence, not living under his shadow. When the doctor finally cleared me for discharge, I felt both relieved and unmoored. Going home didn't feel possible. Home wasn't home anymore. Home was the place where I had pressed my palms into the tile, begging for mercy. My sister Claire arrived that afternoon breathless from rushing and pale with worry. The moment she saw me, she froze her eyes, taking in the bruises on my arms, the swelling at my wrist, the exhaustion etched into every corner of my face. "Oh, God," she whispered, tears rising instantly. "Why didn't you tell me?" Shame crashed over me, the kind that makes you look at your hands instead of someone's face. I had hidden the truth so long that speaking it aloud felt like peeling off armor with trembling fingers. "I didn't want to worry you," I said softly. Claire wrapped me in the gentlest hug I'd ever felt, careful of my belly, careful of my injuries. "You are my sister. Worrying about you is not a burden. It is my right. She brought me home with her that same afternoon, refusing to hear any protest. Her guest room was warm, soft quiet, a place where nothing vibrated with anger, a place where the air wasn't thick with expectation. For the first time in months, I slept without jolting awake to the sound of footsteps or slammed drawers. But the hardest part wasn't over. It hadn't even begun. The first week after the assault was a blur of police calls, victim advocates' medical follow-ups, and court appointments. Every phone call felt like reliving the night. Every question forced me to revisit moments my mind wanted to bury. My sleep fractured. I woke from nightmares where I was back on the kitchen floor trying to shield my belly while Ethan towered over me. Loud noises made my heart race. A dropped spoon, a car door slamming outside, a cupboard closing too hard. My entire body responded with instinctual panic. Some nights I lay awake staring at the ceiling, one hand on my stomach, whispering to my daughter, "We're safe. It's okay." But even saying it felt like a lie. Safety was a concept that had been ripped out of me and replaced with vigilance. When I met with the victim advocate assigned to my case, she gently explained that trauma rewires the mind, that hypervigilance was normal, that healing would take time. I nodded. I understood. I just didn't know how long time meant. Claire took time off work to stay with me. She made me tea. She cooked meals. She drove me to appointments. She sat beside me when the prosecutor explained the charges Ethan now faced: felony assault on a pregnant woman, bodily injury, endangerment of an unborn child. She squeezed my hand when he asked if I was willing to testify. The word yes came out of me before I could think. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted protection. I wanted truth. I wanted a future where my daughter never had to meet the version of her father that put us both in danger. But even with Ethan behind bars awaiting bail, the past clung to me like a bruise that refused to fade. One evening, I tried to walk into the kitchen at Claire's house to help with dinner. The moment my foot crossed the threshold, panic seized my chest so violently my knees buckled. I grabbed the counter, shaking. Claire turned the stove off in an instant and hurried to me. Hey, you are okay? You are with me? This is my kitchen." Not his. But my body didn't believe her. My vision blurred. My breath came fast. I felt the phantom sensation of his hands grabbing my wrist, pulling me down, shoving me into the cold tile. It took 10 minutes to steady my breathing. 10 minutes before I could leave that room. When I finally sat on the couch trembling, Claire knelt in front of me. "You need therapy," she said softly. "Not because you are broken, but because you've survived something unbearable." I nodded. I knew she was right. The next week, I started trauma therapy. My therapist, a gentle woman named Dr. Patel, asked me questions I wasn't ready for. What was the first moment you felt unsafe with him? When did his anger begin? Did he ever apologize in a way that made you feel safe? No, never. She helped me name the things I had been too ashamed to say. Gaslighting, control, isolation, emotional abuse, coercive punishment, physical aggression. She explained how abusers escalate when pregnancy shifts the balance of attention or control. I cried more in that office than I had cried in years. Some days, the sessions left me feeling raw and exposed. Other days, they made me feel lighter, like I was finally unloading a burden I had carried alone for far too long. Meanwhile, my daughter continued to grow. Each ultrasound appointment felt like oxygen. Each flutter, each kick a reminder that she had survived with me. We were healing together. But the hardest months were still unfolding. At 36 weeks, I went into early labor. Claire rushed me to the hospital with a calmness that only thinly hid her panic. As they checked me in, all I could think was, please let her be okay. Please let her come safely. After 8 hours of labor, my daughter arrived. Small, early, but strong. When they placed her on my chest, I sobbed, not with fear this time, but with overwhelming relief. I named her Lydia Hope Carson. Lydia because it felt gentle and warm. Hope because she was the only thing that had kept me alive in the darkest moments. Carson because I refused to carry Ethan's name for her. I refused to let his legacy touch her identity. The nurses understood. Some nodded knowingly, some squeezed my arm. One whispered, She is lucky to have you. The first night in the postpartum unit, I held Lydia for hours. Her skin was soft and warm, her breathing tiny and rhythmic against my chest. But even in that peaceful room, my mind was a storm. I flinched every time footsteps echoed in the hallway. I jerked awake when the door clicked open for routine checks. My body expected danger even where none existed. I knew then that protecting Lydia would mean more than locking doors or filing police reports. It meant healing myself so she would never feel the weight of my trauma. Ethan remained in jail during this time, and the prosecutor worked quickly. Given the severity of the injuries and the statements Ruth made, the case was straightforward. The judge issued an emergency protective order. Ethan could not call me, could not write me, could not request to see me, could not request to see Lydia. When the prosecutor told me that Ethan's attorney suggested a plea deal, I felt a rush of complicated emotions. Fear, relief, grief, anger. The plea meant Ethan would admit guilt in exchange for a reduced sentence, avoiding a lengthy trial. I asked the prosecutor, will he go to prison? Yes, he will serve time. And after that, probation with supervised visitation only. My hands trembled. Supervised visitation. My stomach clenched at the thought. But supervised meant he could not be alone with her. Supervised meant he could not threaten or manipulate. Supervised meant control had shifted. Not fully, but enough. Ruth tried to intervene. She requested grandparent rights through her attorney, framing herself as a concerned figure in Lydia's life. The judge dismissed the petition with visible irritation. He cited her recorded statements, her defense of Ethan, and her complete lack of concern for my safety. She left the courtroom shaking with rage. I left shaking too, but for a different reason. Freedom never arrives in a single moment. It arrives in pieces. Court orders, therapy sessions, baby breaths on your chest, long nights learning how to sleep without fear. Some pieces came easily. Some were jagged and painful. But they were mine. Lydia and I moved permanently into Claire's house for the first few months. I returned to work slowly, part-time at first. The pediatric unit felt like home again, even though I carried invisible scars now. Some days I had to step into the supply closet just to breathe through a flashback. Some nights I jolted awake with my heart racing, convinced I heard Ethan's footsteps in the hallway. Healing was not linear, but it was happening. And every time Lydia wrapped her tiny fingers around mine, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Pure, unfiltered hope. The hardest months of my life did not break me. They rebuilt me, slowly, painfully, piece by piece. And with every piece, I grew stronger. Strong enough to protect my daughter. Strong enough to face what came next. Healing did not arrive as a single moment of clarity. It came in slow waves, unpredictable and uneven, like the tide reshaping the shoreline after a storm. The first few weeks after Lydia's birth were a blur of sleepless nights, feeding schedules, and the tender panic of being responsible for a life so small and fragile. Claire took night shifts when she could, insisting I rest, but rest was a skill I had forgotten how to practice. Every time Lydia stirred in her bassinet, I jolted awake with dread, coiled tight in my chest. The fear that something might happen to her, that Ethan might somehow find us, lived under my skin like a bruise that refused to fade. But Lydia was healthy, strong, and as the days passed, the rhythm of caring for her became a grounding force. I found a strange type of peace in these small, constant acts, feeding her, changing her, holding her close as she slept against my chest. It was the first time in months that my body felt a purpose beyond survival. My therapist, Dr. Patel, told me that motherhood could be both a trigger and a healing force. Each small milestone with Lydia became a lantern pushing back the darkness. The first time she wrapped her tiny fingers around mine. The first time she opened her eyes long enough for me to see their soft gray color. The first time she fell asleep on my shoulder without stirring. Those moments carried me forward. I returned to therapy 2 weeks postpartum, exhausted and raw. Dr. Patel welcomed me with gentle reassurance, never pushing too hard, guiding me slowly into the deeper layers of trauma. She taught me grounding techniques that helped ease the panic when memories surfaced. She helped me understand why certain sounds triggered flashbacks and why my body tensed instinctively when someone moved too quickly near me. She gave me tools not to forget but to navigate the memories without drowning in them. One of the most pivotal steps in my healing happened unexpectedly during a grocery trip with Claire. It was late afternoon, and Lydia was strapped into her carrier against my chest. I had avoided public places convinced I would see Ethan around every corner. But Claire had coaxed me into making small outings as practice for reclaiming my independence. As we walked down the dairy aisle, a man behind us reached for a carton of eggs, and the sudden movement made my heart slam against my ribs. I froze. My vision blurred. My breath caught. Lydia whimpered at my chest as my panic spiraled. Claire took the cart from my shaking hands and whispered, "You are safe. Look at me. You are safe." I kept my eyes on Lydia's tiny head as I breathed through the panic, repeating the word safe silently until the fear loosened its grip. By the time we left the store, my legs felt weak, but a strange clarity settled in. I had survived that moment. I could survive the next, and the ones after that. Healing was happening even in my fear. By the time Lydia was 3 months old, I felt ready to return to work part-time. I missed the hospital. The pediatric unit had once been a place of pride and purpose for me, and stepping back into it felt like reclaiming part of myself. My colleagues welcomed me warmly, some with cautious hugs, some with teary smiles. They had followed the news. They had wondered. They had worried. My first day back, I walked into the break room to find a small basket waiting for me: snacks, herbal tea, a soft blanket, and a handwritten card that simply said, "You are stronger than you think." I stood there with tears pooling in my eyes, realizing how much I had forgotten the feeling of community. Being back at the hospital wasn't easy. Children's laughter could crack me open with grief and joy at the same time. A slammed supply cabinet made me flinch so violently I spilled a tray of tongue depressors, but my coworkers were patient. Some covered for me without hesitation. Others quietly refilled my coffee. They didn't treat me like a victim. They treated me like someone rebuilding, someone worthy of space and support. During my second week back, something happened that felt like fate aligning with healing. As I finished charting after a shift, I heard a familiar voice from behind me. Is that my favorite fighter back on her feet? I turned, and there she was. Nurse Hallie, the woman who had stood between me and my abuser, who had spoken the words that shattered his power, who had given me the chance to tell the truth. She wore her usual calm expression, but her eyes softened when she saw Lydia sleeping in her carrier against my chest. Without thinking, I stepped toward her and threw my arms around her. She hugged me back with surprising strength. "You saved us," I whispered. "You saved both of us." Hallie pulled back, her voice warm and steady. "I gave you a doorway. You walked through it. Not everyone is brave enough to do that." I told her everything. How Lydia was born early but healthy. How the court ruled in my favor. How Ethan had taken a plea deal. How trauma still lived in my bones, but healing was slowly stitching itself together. When I thanked her for the line she had told Ethan about the automatic domestic violence protocol, she smiled knowingly. "Yes," she said. "About that. Let's just say it was partly true and partly strategic. We do document injuries and we do report concerns. But automatic protocol is not as instantaneous as I made it sound." She tapped the side of her head. "Sometimes you have to use the system creatively to protect the patient." That night, I realized Hallie had not only saved my life, she had given Lydia a mother who lived. After reconnecting with Hallie, something lifted inside me. I joined a support group for survivors of domestic violence, where the air was thick with truths spoken in voices that trembled but refused to break. In that room, I wasn't alone. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't dramatic or sensitive or overreacting. I was a survivor among survivors. The women there understood things without explanation. Why sudden movements made me flinch. Why certain rooms felt unsafe. Why apologies from the abuser felt like gasoline poured over a wound. We shared stories. We cried. We laughed at tiny victories. The first night, one of us slept through without waking in fear. The day someone signed divorce papers. The moment a woman finally realized the abuse was not her fault. I grew stronger through them. And one day, without realizing it had happened, I became the one offering support to women just beginning their escape. Healing was not just about patching old wounds. It was about rebuilding an identity I had lost. I started taking Lydia on walks every morning, slow walks, then longer ones. I learned how to breathe deeply again. I learned how to sleep without waiting for danger. I learned how to step into a kitchen without shaking. I learned how to smile without guilt. I learned how to live. And eventually, I learned something I never thought would happen. I learned how to trust again. At Lydia's 6-month checkup, I met someone new, a physical therapist named Daniel who worked in the same hospital. He was gentle, soft-spoken, and never made sudden movements. He always kept a respectful distance, letting me control the pace of every interaction. He never asked about my past unless I brought it up. He sent short messages that didn't demand replies. He never pushed. He listened. He made me feel safe in a way I hadn't felt since before Ethan. We began with small conversations, then coffee, then slow, thoughtful steps towards something that looked like hope. I wasn't falling in love. I was growing into it, carefully, slowly, and on my terms. Lydia thrived during these months. She learned to lift her head, then to roll, then to laugh. Each milestone washed layers of grief off my heart. Watching her grow reminded me that healing wasn't just possible, it was already happening, and each step forward was a step away from the nightmare we had survived. The life Ethan took from me was gone, but a new life was forming in its place. A life I built, a life Lydia would grow up in, a life where love didn't mean fear, a life where safety wasn't earned through silence. And slowly, beautifully, I was becoming whole again. I was ready for the moment that would close the last chapter. I just didn't know it was coming soon. The courthouse was colder than I expected, both in temperature and in spirit. Maybe it was just my nerves, or maybe it was the finality of what was about to happen. But as I walked through the metal detectors holding Lydia's diaper bag and a folder of legal documents, a chill crawled through me. Lydia was 18 months old now. Her tiny fingers curled around the fabric strap of her stroller as she gazed around with innocent curiosity. She had no idea this building represented the end of something enormous. The end of a marriage. The end of a nightmare. The end of him. Claire walked beside me, steady and unshakable. "You ready?" she whispered. I nodded, though ready was not the right word. Prepared, maybe. Determined. I had spent the last year building a life free from fear, but today was about sealing it, locking the door behind me and never allowing that darkness inside again. We reached the family court on the 2nd floor. My attorney Rebecca was already there, flipping through a stack of papers. She straightened when she saw me. "You look strong today," she said, and something in me softened at those words. Once, even hearing Ethan's name made my legs shake. Now I could stand, walk, breathe, move, and exist without him taking up all the space in my lungs. My ex-husband arrived 10 minutes later, escorted by a probation officer. He looked smaller than the last time I saw him in a courtroom. Thinner, paler, like someone who had been forced to sit with himself too long. He glanced at me, then at Lydia, who babbled in her stroller. His eyes flickered with something heavy and unreadable. Regret, anger, shame. All three. It didn't matter. None of his feelings mattered anymore. The hearing began with formalities. The judge reviewed the divorce terms, parental rights visitation agreements I had refused, and the restraining order that would remain indefinitely. Ethan answered questions in short, strained sentences, his voice stripped of the confidence that once filled every room he entered. Then the judge asked if either party had final statements. Ethan's lawyer nudged him. He stood. His hands trembled. For a moment, he looked like a scared boy instead of the man who once pinned me to a kitchen floor while I shielded our unborn daughter. He cleared his throat. "Sarah, I am sorry. I know I can't undo anything. I know I ruined everything. I just want to say I'm sorry." His voice cracked. I knew some people might have softened hearing that. Might have wanted an apology. Might have needed one. I didn't. His remorse felt performative, strategically timed, shaped by sentencing guidelines and probation conditions, not by genuine understanding. I rose slowly when the judge gave me permission to respond. Lydia shifted in her stroller, sensing the tension. I kept my voice steady. You do not owe me an apology. You owe my daughter one, but you will not give it to her today, and you will not give it to her for a long time. I paused. Her safety required me to tell the truth plainly. You hurt us. You almost killed us. I will make sure you never have the chance to do it again. Silence stretched across the courtroom. Ethan lowered his eyes. The judge cleared his throat and moved on, but something in the room had shifted. For the first time, I was not speaking as a victim. I was speaking as a mother, as a survivor, as a woman who had built herself back piece by piece. The hearing ended with the judge's gavel hitting wood like the closing click of a lock. Final, permanent, done. When the judge dismissed us, I exhaled the breath I hadn't realized was trapped in my chest. Rebecca squeezed my shoulder. You did it. But I knew it wasn't just the paperwork that mattered. It was what came next. Outside the courtroom, the probation officer escorted Ethan toward the elevators. Just before the doors closed, he turned slightly. For a split second, our eyes met. There was no rage this time, no control, only emptiness. The door slid shut, and I felt something inside me close with them. A door, a chapter, a version of myself who lived locked in fear. Gone. Claire bumped her shoulder lightly into mine. You want to go home? I shook my head. Not yet. There was something I needed to do first. Something symbolic. Something final. I drove to the old house, the house where my marriage had begun in hope and ended in horror. The house where Ethan shoved me hard enough to nearly take Lydia's life. The house that had haunted my nightmares. I had sold it months earlier, but the new owners weren't moving in for another week. My realtor had given me temporary access to clear out the last few personal items the movers had missed. I parked across the street and sat for a moment staring at the front door. The last time I stood there, I was carrying a hospital bag with oxygen tubes taped to my arm, terrified to step back inside. This time, I stepped out of the car with steady legs. Claire waited in the driveway with Lydia while I walked toward the door, holding one object in my hand, a small brass key. The key to the house. The key I had once used to enter a place I thought would be my safe haven. When I pushed the door open, a wave of memories washed over me. The kitchen where I learned to fear my own footsteps. The hallway where Ethan's voice echoed through the walls. The nursery where I fell clutching my unborn baby, praying she would live. It took everything in me to walk through those rooms without breaking. But I did. I picked up the last box near the old fireplace. Inside was a single object wrapped in tissue paper. I lifted it gently. Lydia's first ultrasound photo. The one Ruth had thrown away. The one Hallie had retrieved from medical records for me months ago, saying no mother should lose the first picture of her child. I held it close to my chest, feeling my throat constrict. This tiny, grainy image was proof that Lydia survived. Proof that I survived. Proof that we were stronger than what tried to break us. When I stepped back outside, Claire watched me in quiet understanding. Ready, she asked. I nodded. We drove to a quiet overlook on the edge of town, a spot where the mountains met the sky, washed in golden evening light. I carried Lydia out of her car seat and held her on my hip while Claire set down a small fireproof bowl on the ground. I pulled the brass key from my pocket. The weight of it was familiar. Heavy, metallic, cold. It had trapped me for years. Even after leaving the house, I had kept it tucked away, afraid to let it go, as if releasing it meant admitting everything that happened inside those walls was real. But now, holding Lydia close, smelling her baby shampoo, feeling her warm breath against my shoulder, I knew it was time. Time to close the last door. Time to let the past die quietly. Time to free the final piece of myself. I dropped the key into the bowl. It landed with a sharp metallic clink. I didn't look away. Claire lit a match and handed it to me without speaking. I touched the flame to a small paper towel under the key. Fire caught slowly, then grew into soft, rolling orange. The brass heated, glowing faintly in the flames. The smell of burning paper rose into the mountain breeze. Lydia watched with wide, curious eyes. I whispered to her, "This is the past, sweetheart, and we do not live there anymore." When the key finally blackened and cracked, I felt something loosen deep inside my chest. A weight, a fear, a memory, a ghost. Gone. I kissed Lydia's forehead. She giggled, unaware her life had just shifted. Unaware. Her mother had just closed a door she would never need to open. Claire wiped her eyes discreetly. "Proud of you," she murmured. I was proud too. Proud that I had survived. Proud that I had rebuilt. Proud that I had learned to breathe again. Proud that I had become the woman Lydia needed. As the last embers dimmed, I lifted Lydia in my arms and turned toward the sunset. Warm light washed over us, painting our faces gold. I felt the future opening like a horizon after years of storm. Safe, free, ours. Some people think revenge means hurting someone back, but sometimes the real revenge is finally being free. The real revenge is walking into a life they can never touch. The real revenge is peace. If you've stayed with me until the end of this story, I need you to take a moment and breathe with me. Not because the story is over, but because what comes after the story might matter even more. You've walked with me through darkness, through kitchen floors and hospital rooms, through fear and pain and rebuilding. And now I want you to understand something as deeply as I learned it. No one deserves to live in fear inside their own home. Not me, not my daughter, not you, not anyone. And if my story hit something inside you, if it stirred memories or worries or a quiet voice you've been trying to ignore, then I need you to hear what I'm about to say in the clearest way possible. You are not alone. You are not imagining things. You are not overreacting. Abuse doesn't always look like movie scenes or dramatic explosions. Sometimes it looks like isolation, like control disguised as concern, like a raised voice that happens just once, like a shove that only happened because he was stressed, like the way your stomach twists when you hear keys in the door, like walking on eggshells in your own home. If any part of this feels familiar, please listen. You deserve safety. You deserve peace. You deserve a life where your heartbeat doesn't spike every time someone else's mood changes. I know leaving feels impossible. I know that fear settles into your bones and convinces you that staying is safer. I know the excuses you whisper to yourself because I whispered them too. It was just one time. He didn't mean it. It's my fault for saying the wrong thing. He's stressed. He apologized. It won't happen again. It will. It always does. And it escalates. What happened to me didn't start in one night. It was a slow burn that turned into a wildfire the moment I became most vulnerable. So please, if you're in a situation that feels even a little too close to mine, reach out to someone today. A friend, a sibling, a coworker, a doctor, a neighbor, anyone you trust. And if you feel like you have no one, I promise you there are still people ready to help you. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available all day, every day. You can call them at 800-799-72233. If you can't call because someone monitors your phone, you can text START to 887888. If you can't text safely, you can chat with them online. You don't need a plan. You don't need to know what step 2 or 3 or 4 looks like. You just need to take step 1, tell someone. And if you're not the one living in fear, but you know someone who might be, please don't look away. Please don't assume it's none of your business. Please don't wait for her to bring it up. Ask her privately. Tell her you're worried. Offer a safe place. Offer to go with her to talk to a professional. Victims don't need judgment or pressure. They need support, patience, and safety. And to the healthcare workers watching this, the teachers, the counselors, the social workers, the people who interact with vulnerable women every single day, you have more power than you think. Sometimes one sentence, one observation, one brave moment can save a life. It saved mine. If you took anything from my story, let it be this. You can change someone's trajectory with kindness and courage. So now, I want you to do something for me. Something small but important. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Not because the algorithm likes it, but because it tells me someone out there is listening. Someone out there heard this message. Someone out there might pass it on to the person who needs it most. And if my story helped you in any way, gave you strength, clarity, courage, or even just a moment of connection, tell me that too. I read every single comment. They remind me why I share these parts of my life. They remind me why surviving wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Wherever you are, whatever you're facing, I want you to remember this one thing. You are stronger than you know. You deserve a life without fear, and you are allowed to choose yourself. Always.